Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of the podcast Boys. I am one of your hosts, Connor Nielsen, and joining me, as always, is the Comics Kid 2099. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
I am doing well, and yourself?
It is a nice, sunny, early spring weekend. I guess technically it's still winter, but I'm well. I'm doing very well. For those who do not know, this at one time was a Twin Peaks podcast, and now it is adjacently a Twin Peaks podcast episode of Twin Peaks, and then the movie, and then other tangentially related list topics. We've been talking about films and television shows in which alumni of Twin Peaks appeared. Today we are talking about the 1998 film The Faculty, directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Kevin Williamson. And the Twin Peaks connection here is Piper Laurie, who played Catherine Martell in the television show Twin Peaks. And here is a teacher. Comics Kid, why don't you explain the plot of The Faculty?
Okay, the plot. Have you ever seen John Carpenter's The Thing?
Yes.
Have you seen any of the 4 or 5 variants of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers film?
I have not, no.
Oh, okay. Have you seen The Breakfast Club?
Yep.
Okay, so you have seen 2/3 of this movie already. I joke. I actually really enjoyed this movie, but it is a blending of things that most people have probably seen before. Like there was a Body Snatchers movie, I think in the 50s, and then one in the 70s. That's probably the most well known. It had Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy in it. And then there was one, I think, in the 90s, and there was one with Nicole Kidman and Felix from the Daniel Craig James Bond movies in the 2007. So like this is it feels to me like Robert Rodriguez was basically paying homage to films that he loved from his slightly younger days. And like I say, I'm poking fun at the movie, but I actually enjoy this movie. But basically the premise is it's a small town high school, and these creatures end up taking over members of the school, and then or the faculty, hence the title of the movie. And then it's a collective group of students. They have to put a stop to it, and that's basically the premise. Connor, what did you think of this movie?
This is a movie that's been on my radar for some time. I like Robert Rodriguez. He is kind of the definition of a hit or miss director, because when he hits, it's very entertaining. And when he misses, it's generally just kind of boring, if not for lack of trying. But he usually is reliant on bringing a certain energy here. But something about this just felt like late 90s charm of the movie. But I would actually say I was disappointed with this movie.
Okay.
Not even necessarily in like this didn't live up to whatever hype I had. It was one of those things where I would say for the first 35, 40 minutes, I was really into this. And then once it is done introducing you to the concept and it's time for the plot to kind of get rolling, I think it kind of starts to fall apart.
Really? Okay.
Yes. We can get into that, but I think what works here is very obvious. I think that the casting is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I think that Elijah Wood is really solid as sort of like the outsider nerd character. I think Jordana Brewster is actually quite good in this. I kind of know her from, I think most people would probably recognize her from the Fast and the Furious movies. But I think Robert Patrick just steals the show. He is
Took
so
the words right
awesome.
out of my mouth. Yes.
And I honestly think, he's sort of this antagonistic presence for the first 35, 40 minutes. And once he kind of gets, he's kind of in the background for, the next hour or so. Well, maybe not that much. But once we kind of get away from him, I started realizing that I wasn't liking the movie as much. Once we kind of brought all of the other characters of like the high schoolers together and we put them all together, it sort of felt like the movie has to restart. And I felt like there were structural issues. I felt like there's a self-awareness that comes up in the kind of middle of the movie. This is written by Kevin Williamson of Scream fame. And I feel like the self-awareness is weak. I didn't like it. Yeah, I don't know. Like it was one of those things where it was never bad, but I'll tell you this. I wrote a screenplay that you've actually read. I don't want to go into details of what that screenplay is. This felt like that first draft to me,
Okay.
where the feedback I got from that, and I recently reread it, and I agree with the majority of that feedback, which is the first act is really here. It's good job, Connor, but like once we get out of the first act, it just kind of like things just kind of feel like they get dropped and like it just feels like you have ideas for scenes and sequences, and like it kind of feels like the story drops out, or whatever story the intention was. It feels like it's not as strong and as clear as it once was, and I feel like that is exactly how I would describe The Faculty. But I did enjoy it. It's on HBO Max. If anyone is interested in this movie, that's probably the best way to seek it out. So I've been going on a little bit here. Comics Kid, how did you feel about The Faculty?
Well, like I said earlier, I like it. I don't know if I had exactly the opposite reaction as you, but I feel like I was enjoying it more once all of our teenage characters are like together. And then like when they're all in that room, and then like Josh Hartnett is kind of making fun of Elijah Wood, like, oh, aliens, yeah, right. And then like what's his name? The talk show host whose name I can't remember.
Jon Stewart.
Yeah,
Green
thank
Lantern,
you.
Jon Stewart.
Yeah, it took me a minute watching this. I was like, I know that's somebody, but I don't know who it is. But yeah, so he shows up, and then it's like, oh yeah, aliens are a thing, and then they're all together. I think once we got all of our cast together, I was enjoying it a little more because I got to see all these like personalities be in the same like story. And it takes, like you said, probably about 30 minutes for that to happen. And then it's kind of, the Breakfast Club, but with aliens, right? Like it's got, the nerd and the queen bee and the goth girl and the jock and then the other guy. Then they're all like kind of yelling at each other. And I was enjoying that. I don't know what I think the Breakfast Club is considered to be kind of a cult classic, or maybe just a classic, not even a cult. But I feel like that's kind of, it's hitting on a lot of those things that people like from that movie. And so for me, I was enjoying a lot of the lead up, but I think I was settled in a little bit more once all of our main characters get together. And I understand that you have to set up the characters, you have to introduce them, and there's quite a few of them. And since you've got like Elijah Wood is playing the nerd, he's generally not going to be hanging out with Josh Hartnett playing the I don't even know what you would call his archetype in high school, but
he's like the bad boy.
Yeah, thank you.
Rebel.
Yeah. And so I agree with you that the cast is spot on. You will never find a higher percentage of, hey, it's that guy, or hey, it's that woman. Our Twin Peaks connection is Piper Laurie, and she's in it more than I was. I was afraid when we did our Christmas Vacation podcast. I was afraid that she was going to be in it for like 30 seconds because she's like listed way down on Google when you go and look at this cast. But she's in it more than I thought she would be, and so I was glad to see that. And I think she and Famke Janssen, I'm sure I butchered that, and I apologize. I think they're doing a pretty good job of playing two different kinds of characters, because you get to see them as their normal human selves, and then you get to see them as the alien is now taken over. And some of them, like Robert Patrick, there's not as much of a difference. But I agree. I think he was maybe my favorite part of the movie. I actually, at the football game, when he's like grinning ear to ear, when his players are like just decimating the enemy team, I thought that was maybe my favorite part for him. And he's like, giving high fives whenever someone like gets knocked to the ground. But yeah, I like the cast. I actually have never seen any of the Fast and the Furious movies, but I recognize Jordana Brewster from a movie called Annapolis, and I thought for the longest time that was actually Meghan Markle. And so in this movie, I was like, hey, is that Meghan Markle? And I looked it up. I was like, oh, but it is the woman that I was thinking of from Annapolis. So yeah, she's in it. Clea Duvall, who I know her from an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was in Heroes season 1. Like, I don't even like background characters. Like Usher is in this for like 5 minutes. And so like even just minor characters, you're like, hey, I know who that is. Like
it's that guy from that 70s show.
Yeah. Hyde from that 70s show is in it for very little time. Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore is Elijah Wood's dad in this, and so it's fun. I think that is a lot of the fun of this movie. And if this had a less star-studded cast, I don't know how much I would have enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, and I had a similar thing because it is feel. I think what the casting actually does do, especially in that first like act of the movie in terms of setting everything up, is it does make the events feel sprawling. Like it does sort of feel like, even though it is just a high school, like when you're in high school, it feels like it's your world, right? Like this is like kind of your social world that you are participating in. And so, there are so many people that I went to high school that I just, never really knew. Like there's actually a person who's professionally playing football right now that I went to high school with, and we never spoke to each other. He's some guy named Kendrick something. Like I'm sure no one listening to this has anything to do with sports. Anyways, I've been told he plays football professionally now, which is awesome. But I never talked to him. We were in the same graduating class and everything. So like, you have Elijah Wood's character kind of brushing shoulders with football captain man, but it's very tangential, right? I don't think Clea Duvall and Usher see each other. You know what I mean? And so it's like you get stuff like that where when you do get all of these characters finally to come together, it does sort of feel a little bit like, all these people from across the world have come together to band together to fight the aliens. You know what I mean? Like, but it's on a smaller scale, but I think it did a good job of feeling suitably sprawling for this kind of premise. But yeah, no, the casting is awesome. I should say that Jon Stewart is playing a character named Edward Furlong.
Yeah.
That has to be a deliberate reference. I don't know why though. It's like Terminator is not for anyone who doesn't know, Edward Furlong is the actor who plays John Connor in Terminator 2. But the Terminator's not an alien.
Right.
I don't get the reference.
Yeah, and I knew they were calling him like Professor Furlong or Mr. Furlong, and I never caught them calling him Edward, but then I was looking at like the cast list and I saw that he was credited as that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is that actor's name. And I wonder if it was just, well, we've already got The Thing and we've already got like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. We've got Robert Patrick. So let's go ahead and
that's probably what I didn't even think about Robert Patrick. That's probably what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it could be a little distracting maybe if you're, I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe if you're already like taking note of all these big stars, some of whom weren't big stars at the time. Like I was reading trivia about this movie, and Elijah Wood apparently found out in filming this movie, he found out that Peter Jackson was making The Lord of the Rings. And Harry Knowles, who runs the website Ain't It Cool News, he is a minor character in the background of like 2 scenes in this movie. He was the one who told Elijah Wood, hey, you should go for it. And so that's kind of, like historically, that's an interesting note about this movie. I remember when Planet Terror first came out, I remember reading an interview with Robert Rodriguez, where he said that like years ago he had this like 30 pages of a zombie script, and that was all he had. And he said he was telling these kids, and I'm assuming based on the context that he was talking about when he was on this movie, but he said, I have this zombie script and zombies are going to be huge really soon, so we need to make this thing. And then for whatever reason it never happened, and then zombies did become huge, and then he made Planet Terror, but it was almost like he was too late to bringing zombies back. But I do not think I could find that interview where he was talking about that, but he mentioned Elijah Wood by name when he was talking about that story. And so I know he later worked on Sin City with Elijah Wood, but that was like the year before Planet Terror. So I'm thinking that he was like had begun working on Planet Terror like by the time he was working on this movie. So that's just my speculation, but that's another kind of interesting fact I think about this.
Yeah, a few more things actually about like the casting of like, oh my God, is that person like Salma Hayek is in this.
Yeah.
For some reason. Like, and I mean, that's not like a diss on the movie or anything. It's just wild where it's like, okay, I'm looking up the cast and I'm like, wow, this is like 90s Thirst Trap, the movie. Like you have, Josh Hartnett, who was like the teen heartthrob at the time. I'm pretty sure there was like, Elijah Wood was sort of like the Tom Holland of his time, where he's kind of like the shy, cute boy, You have Robert Patrick, who is in shape in this movie, but then for the fella, and for the ladies who also like ladies, like Clea Duvall is absolutely playing to that type. But then you also have like Jordana Brewster, who is exactly the type I would have had a crush on if I was a teenager in this. And then like Famke Jensen and Salma Hayek. It's like, it's insane. Like just how many just like attractive people from the late 90s are in this. But the funniest thing is when I load up this movie on HBO Max and I have like the little banner, my first response is, "Oh my God, is that Usher?" I don't know why it was him that my eye was immediately drawn to. He's standing next to Elijah Wood, who I also didn't know was in the movie, and my response was, "Oh my God, is that Usher?"
and he's in it. Am I wrong? About 5 minutes, right? Like it's weird that they plastered him on promotional material for the movie. Maybe that was intentional. Like people will come to see Usher, and then oopsie, he's barely in it.
I'm just trying to think how big he was in the late 90s, because like when I'm a kid coming up in the 2000s, he's got all the big radio hits. But what was he doing in the late 90s? I wonder if he was like a popular recording artist. Fair point to that, but I don't know if he was or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I would have been just a little. I really didn't start listening into like modern music until I started driving. So I would not have known who Usher was in '98. But yeah, I like to. I'm thinking he might have done some music, and then he got like really huge after this movie.
You think it's like a Will Smith situation where it's like I'm doing acting and music. Okay, looks like I'm tracking better at music. Let me just choose that. Whereas like Will Smith was like
the other way.
Tracking. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. And speaking of Elijah Wood, yeah, I obviously knew that Piper Laurie was in this, and then I think I knew that Famke Janssen was in it, and I think I knew Josh Hartnett was in it. I don't think I knew that Elijah Wood was in it, and so as soon as he walks on screen, I'm like, look at babyface Elijah Wood. He's like he's 12, and
he's so tiny.
Yeah, and this wasn't really that far. Like I said, he auditioned for The Lord of the Rings like while making this movie, and then The Lord of the Rings, was it 2001 when the first one came out?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so then, but it took them like 2 years of filming, so it would have been like shortly after this, I think. But still, when I watched The Lord of the Rings, he doesn't look this young. Maybe it's the hair. Like he's got, more volume in his hair when he's Frodo. And then like here he just comes in and you mentioned Tom Holland. That's a good comparison. Like this, this tiny little boy. And I mean, I'm sounding patronizing, and yes, but like he walks in and I'm like, I'm used to Elijah Wood having a little bit of like beard, not like a big beard, but just a little bit of facial hair. And here I'm just like, oh, I just want to like pinch his cheeks and, like put him in my lap.
I think a lot of it comes down to like his clothes. Like his pants look like his legs must be like pencils, like
yeah.
I can't get off the casting, but like talking about Elijah Wood, his parents, you had said that, his dad is Christopher McDonald, who played Shooter McGavin in what's it called? He's also like Happy Gilmore. He's also like the abusive husband of Gina Davis and Thelma and Louise. I think I love Christopher McDonald. Like he is like a perfect like movie jerk. Like in everything he's in, he is so good at playing that character. I think he might be one of my favorite like character actors because he's also really entertaining in this movie. And actually, Elijah Wood's mom, I recognized as the grandma from Boyhood, and so it was like everybody.
Yeah.
So. And also just a quick thing about Robert Patrick, something I noticed about him while watching this. I realized who he reminds me of. You're not going to know who this person is because no one will know who this person is. I have a lifelong friend who lives in Seattle, and I'm like, that's who he is. Like ever since I've been watching like Terminator 2 and all these other things that he shows up in, I'm like, who does this guy remind me of? Grant, I know you're not listening to this, but you remind me of Robert Patrick. So, and also
hopefully not in this movie.
Oh no! I mean, just like, but physically in general.
Oh, okay, good.
They have like similar faces and like ways of carrying themselves. But I will say, Robert Patrick sounds exactly like Stephen Lang, who was like the bad guy from Avatar.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. He's also. Have you seen the Hannibal movie, Manhunter?
I've not, no.
Okay, Stephen Lang, a young Stephen Lang is in that. I say young, he
Whoa.
younger than Avatar. Yeah, he's I mean it's like that was like in the 80s, I think. It was pre Silence of the Lambs, but yeah, just a fun little fact about Stephen Lang. I also so I just watched Goldeneye for the first time about a week ago. And so Famke Jensen, I think that was like her first big movie. And I notice here she's playing like the exact opposite. Like in Goldeneye, she's like extremely like there's no better way to say it. She's very horny for murder, and horny for like murder via horny. And then here she's like a wallflower, like she's kind of like stuttering through her lesson plan when she's teaching. And so like she's playing Xenia Onatopp in Goldeneye, and here she's playing the opposite. So that's what Xenia Onabottom. Sorry, I know that was awful. I thought of it like 2 hours ago, and I thought I have to say it. I also, when you said you pulled up the movie on HBO Max, and I thought you were going to have the same weird story that I had. This is a very weird thing that happened. I pull it up on HBO Max, and it starts off, and Robert Patrick is screaming at the football team in Spanish. And I was like, what? And I thought, okay, maybe this is like a Fire Walk With Me thing, and this is like another movie, and like the teenage characters are watching this movie that Robert Patrick is in, but they're watching it in Spanish. And then I'm like, no, like I skip forward about 15 minutes or so, and they're still talking in Spanish. So I was like, oh no. And I thought we were going to have another situation like we did last time, where you had chosen the Mod Squad, but then we weren't able to watch it, and so we had to choose something else. I was like, oh no. And I was like, because I looked on the settings, it was set to English audio, but it was giving me Spanish audio. And I was like, why? What? And I changed it to Spanish, thinking, well, maybe it'll be English audio when I change it to Spanish. And it was still Spanish. I just reloaded the page, and everything was fine. But I thought you were going to have a similar story to that. And I was like, this is weird. So that was my like minor panic attack when I first started watching, was like, we're not going to be able to talk about this in Spanish. Like I can't watch this.
Yeah, no, I did not encounter that. That's weird though.
I
guess we should probably talk about the movie a little more.
Yeah.
I feel like we just talked about that.
Why don't you talk a little bit about your problems? You said you had structural problems with it.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Like, so I feel like you can like draw a line at where I kind of start to lose, not interest, but like where my interest starts to deflate. Mm-hmm. And it's that line is funny enough at like the moment that made me almost like spit out my drink, and I jumped off of my couch. And I was like, what? And that was, not only is this the most 90s thing ever in terms of casting, it's the most 90s thing ever in terms of needle drops. I never, ever thought I would hear Alice Cooper covered by Creed. So when I hear that crappy like 90s guitar fuzz playing over like those chords, I'm like, wait a minute. I know those chords. Like that's Alice Cooper. And then I hear Scott Stapp's awful like Eddie Vedder impression. I'm like, oh no. And it's like, I'm recognizing that melody. I got to try to listen to like, and that whole conversation Elijah Wood has with his dad in the car. I don't know what they were talking about. I was just like, is this really happening?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, because after the movie was over, I went and listened to Alice Cooper's "I'm 18," and I had a good time listening to it. I didn't have as vitriol, as much of a bile reactive as you did, but that's funny. Speaking,
I was like shining when that happened. I was like, ah.
Well, the movie opens. I don't remember what it was, but it's something by The Offspring. And yes. I was like, this is the most 90s thing ever, and I kind of don't care. Like, I was not...
No, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's so 90s. Like, there's for good or ill. But, like, I was not of this age in the 90s, but still, like, this makes me think that I was a teenager of the 90s. Like, that I'm going to go cruise the strip and smoke cigarettes and do all the things that I didn't do. But it takes me back to those times where I would have done that. And it's I mean, it's going to be really wild. Like if I go back to listen to watch a movie that came out like in 2007, like you know how in the first Iron Man movie Tony says like I don't want to see this on your MySpace page, and like wow,
Yeah.
that's a dated reference, but like at the time it felt fine, and now I'm like, oh, now I know what the people in the 90s felt like. It wasn't anything at all to hear the Offspring or Creed doing an Alice Cooper, but yeah, that I think sometimes it really works, and sometimes it's like, oh, that's what they were trying to do.
You know what? You know what movie came out this exact same year that had a similar needle drop where I just couldn't like
What
sit
was it?
still. So have you ever seen the movie Wild Things?
Is that the one that has that guy
Yep.
who was in that show? We watched the show and it was the monsters. What show am I talking about? You know what I'm talking.
Wayward Pines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt Dillon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've heard of it. I don't know. I mean, I haven't watched it.
So for a second, so the movie, yeah, Wild Things. I thought it was referencing this movie for a hot second, but it's not. Because he's selling. So Josh Hartnett is selling like sex tapes or something to like other students where they're like Nev Campbell and Jennifer Love Hewitt, and he's like full frontal. There's like a famous sex scene in Wild Things where it's Nev Campbell, but it's also Denise Richards.
Okay.
And I think that came out earlier the same year, so it's 98. So I don't know when this was shot, but like that movie is like 90s movie, the movie, and it has a needle drop that is Why Can't We Be Friends as covered by Smash Mouth.
That sounds awful.
It's hilarious. Like I cannot sit still. I'm laughing so hard every time that needle drop happens. Yeah, Wild Things is a guilty pleasure of mine. It's so silly. But yeah, sorry. I'm still just talking about like not even talking about the movie. You asked me like structural issues I have with it. So I just feel like from that point on, like where Elijah Wood is like, we've set everything up, right? Like he's seen something. He and Jordana Brewster have seen something, and no one believes them. And he has to go to school, and that's where like the alien invasion is really taking root. And more or less, the rest of the movie takes place in one day and then into the night, right? So that's what we get. And I think that what we have here, like in a lot of ways, like it makes sense. Like if you were to break it down, like on paper, I don't know. Like I think what ends up happening is you have Robert Rodriguez, who is all about like narrative momentum and energy and efficiency. And then you have this story, which it's now 30 minutes into your movie. You got to start like picking up the pace. And to the movie's credit, it's a very well paced movie. At one point, I paused this and I was like over halfway through, and it did not feel like I was. But I felt like there were like scenes that felt like they were dropped, and there were like subplots that felt like they were truncated, and there were like character dynamics that felt rushed. Where we get Clea Duvall and what's his name? Spider? What's that guy's name? The football captain?
Yeah, it's Sam or some. It's not Sam. It starts with an S.
Football Spider's guy. Yeah, Spider's the guy from Avatar. I'm just gonna call him Spider.
Okay.
So you have like that where it's like you have a scene where I like that character a lot, the Spider guy, where he's just like, hey, I don't like that, teachers, like even teachers are like kind of enabling my lack of education. Mm-hmm. And then like Clea Duvall is like finds that very attractive about him, that he actually does care about, failing or succeeding on his own merits. And you can almost like kind of see that like he's probably having a renewed interest in academics because it's a challenge for him, right? Football mm-hmm. and basketball aren't challenges for him. And then like we don't really get any development on that until like we're in the third act and he's like gonna go do something risky and they kiss. And it's like, oh, that's right. Like that was like a whole thing. But in between that, we need to have them all coming together. We need to have like I think a way too long scene that is basically like the blood test from The Thing, but with drugs. And that scene lacked, I think, all the tension that was in The Thing. I don't know, like it was just like one of those things where I could, you know what, I'm gonna do in my best Comics Kid impression. Oh. I think this would have been better suited as a TV miniseries.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think that with the amount of characters we have, they're all like set up properly. They're all compelling. And their individual subplots and just kind of seeing them as sort of like a, Brian K. Vaughan's Runaways type situation. Like you can do something with this, better than the crappy Runaways show on Hulu, but like you can, there's something here that you can really take advantage of. But I think that like the 100-minute runtime it does a disservice to that.
Yeah, because as you were going through what you were just talking about, in my mind I was thinking, is the problem that there's too many characters, or is the problem that, because it sounds to me like you were like me, you were interested in the character dynamics, and then we have to focus on, well, this is a sci-fi movie, we're kind of doing a thing, invasion of the body snatcher situation, so we have to get back to that. And so I was kind of wondering, like, well, if you drop some of the characters, would that help, or like you said, make it longer? Because I'm one of those people. If you tell me that a movie is 2 hours and 30 minutes long, I'm going to be like, oh boy, like I'm going to have to strap in. You know, this is going to be a long day. But an hour and 45 barely feels like a feature-length movie, especially since these days a movie like this, a genre film, would be longer, right? Like I can't think of the last time I watched a movie that was only 100 minutes long. And so I think you're right. Like if it had more time to let some of this breathe, then the character development that you're talking about could have come in a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think with how long it kind of takes to get the concept and ball rolling, it does almost beg for a longer runtime to properly like see all of those various characters and subplots seen through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
On the contrary, though, I was really inclined to watch this because it's at 100 minutes. I'm like, hell yeah, let's turn this on. We just got out of award season where everything was 2.5 hours, and I was like, I like Tar. It's also 2 hours and 40 minutes. you know, it's like every movie was at least 2.5 hours to 3 hours, and it was like I like some of these movies a lot, but right now when I get off work and I've just gotten something to eat, like, and there's other stuff I want to do with my evening, 2.5 hours takes up a lot of time.
Oh yeah, I agree. What do you think of the meta stuff? You mentioned, you know, Kevin Williamson, he wrote Scream. Have you watched the Scream movies, Connor?
I have actually. I've seen all of them except for his numbers last week, but it's not made by Wes Craven, so it doesn't really count as a Scream movie to me.
I actually kind of like the first Scream movie. I feel like it's very clever that it's like it's a slasher movie, but it's also aware of, you know, the things that make a slasher movie and make a slasher movie work. And it's kind of pointing at those things. What do you think of this movie kind of doing that same thing?
See, to me, what I like about Scream is that it's like, I think we've talked about this a little bit, where like when we talk about Deadpool, those movies are kind of annoying because, and this is sort of like the weird like contradiction where it comes to cleverness, where if you make something that is legitimately clever, it's really hard to make it in a way where you're not letting the audience know that you think what you've just done is clever. Mm-hmm. But if you do that, it almost ceases to feel clever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
where it's like, yeah, that might have been clever, but because you think it's clever, it makes me not as into it. And what I like about Scream is that Kevin Williamson wrote a legitimately clever screenplay. But I don't think Wes Craven thinks it's clever. I think he just thinks it's fun. And so, like, he is having just a fun time bringing it to life. And because it has, like, no pretension about, like, how witty and smart it is, like, it is legitimately clever. And, like, you're able to really have fun with it having its cake and eating it, too. But then when you get to this movie, it feels like he was hired because he wrote Scream. And then they said, well, do what you did with Scream. And he just kind of goes, okay. So he kind of has like a scene or two where characters reference Invasion of the Body Snatchers and like, you know, the short story that movie was kind of based on, you know what I mean? So it's like you have that stuff and it's like that, it almost feels like half baked or like just kind of integrated because of his name.
Yes, it feels a lot like that. And because I think I was reading some trivia on it. I don't think that Kevin Williamson was the first screenwriter. I think he was brought in because, or someone else wrote the script in like the early 90s, and then nobody was interested. And then Scream became a hit. And then they said, Kevin Williamson, come here, quick, do something. And so, yeah, I think it's exactly what you were talking about, is that he was, you know, Scream was like, oh, that meta thing. And so let's do more of that. And I feel kind of bad for him. Like, I'm looking at stuff he's done, and like the majority of his credits are Scream based on characters created by, But he also did a movie I watched a year or two ago called Cursed, which was also a Wes Craven thing, and it was a werewolf movie. It had Jesse Eisenberg was in it, Joshua Jackson, and Christina Ricci, and
Whoa.
yeah, well, I mean, it sounds great. It's kind of like this, where it's got a lot of character actors that you are gonna, and some of them are just like leading actors that you're gonna recognize, and that movie felt like it was trying to be like Scream again. And that's also, like I said, written by Kevin Williamson. And I feel bad for him because it seems like he had, like you said, a pretty clever script with Scream. And then his career was do that again. And it's hard to catch lightning in a bottle 2 or 3 times. And with this movie, while because you'll hear writers say like ideas are cheap. Like if I said I'm gonna do a story about a superhero, he's a guy who dresses up like I don't know, a weasel, but he has like he fights crime at night. He doesn't have any powers, but he's really rich and he's got like a car and all these guys. You would say, oh, it's like Batman. And it's like, yeah, but like there's a certain point where I think King Solomon in the Bible said there's nothing new under the sun. And so like you can point at a movie and say this is just that but different. And so like despite my joke at the beginning of the podcast where I was saying this is The Thing and Invasion and etc., I was still on board because The Thing is unique from this because it's set in a remote locale in the South Pole, I think. And this is set in small town suburbia high school, and that works because if this was set in the South Pole, then I would have said hang on a second, you guys are just making that movie. But I think even though I enjoy this movie, if you told me I can only watch one movie, The Thing or The Faculty, I would probably watch The Thing. And so but this is saying let's take a little bit from The Thing. Like there's a part where one of the teachers gets beheaded, and then you're seeing her head has like little crawlies, and it's getting back to the body. It's very much like The Thing. But it being like the setting and the characters that we are seeing this story through their eyes, it makes it just unique enough that I think it works. But I don't know. I'm not sure where I was going with that.
Well, no, I agree with you, and like. I think that when you are a writer, it is important to be like, I don't know, because I have similarly conflicting thoughts that you do, where it's like, as a writer, you can't afford to just think of, well, the idea is enough to carry it, right? But some ideas just are better than other ideas, and so it's like, but then there's also like the Star Wars prequel apologist argument, which is just like, well, George Lucas came up with a brilliant idea for a prequel trilogy, right? It's brilliant. It's a 10 out of 10 concept, like I said. It has an 8-inch. It's just so amazing, and it's just like it's the best concept that anyone's ever had for a trilogy. It's really great, It's just the execution has something to be desired, right? Which, to me just sounds like, well, they only 80% of it. It's like, it's just like I don't know, like when it comes to The Faculty, like you're right, it is just sort of taking all of these other things. Where it's like, yeah, it is The Thing. There's like the scene that is just the blood test thing. But when it's teenagers and it's like, and it is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but there is something clever about mashing that up with The Breakfast Club, where it's like when you're a teenager, you're undergoing changes, right? And like the way you see adults changes. Like, you know what I mean? Like there is something legitimately thoughtful and cool there where you can make it a cool, like, teenage story about the way they see the world changing, but also make it a fun genre thing. And then like also it's like, when you're a teenager, you're experimenting with different things, right? Some people experiment with their sexuality. Some people experiment with, I don't want to do sports anymore. I want to look more at academics. People change up their look. Some people experiment with drugs, which is like what the sort of the blood test scene in this movie is. They all have to do drugs because they find out that the drugs dry out the aliens, right? So if you do the drug and and you don't, fritz out, then like you're good. And so like there's a lot of cool like narratives and like things that you can map onto it from like the teenage stuff onto the genre stuff. I just wish it was given the proper. I don't know. Like it's a good idea. It's a really good concept for a movie.
There's, if I may piggyback off what you're saying, there's this running theme through the movie of how to say this without like bringing down the mood. When you're a teenager, like if an adult does something horrible and then you run and tell another adult and they don't believe you, and it's like, well, you're just a teenager, and that is present in the movie. Now it's given a completely different context. In real life, it's more likely going to be, something like sexual assault or rape or something like that. And in a movie, Jordana Brewster and Elijah Wood, they witness, they find a dead body, and they're listening in on Robert Patrick and Piper Laurie. And so they're like, okay, those two are up to something. And when Elijah Wood calls the cops and tells his parents, nobody believes him. And that's like, I would say, really that's only present in like the middle act of the movie, because by the time you get to the last act, just about everyone is an alien. And by that point, they've given up on trying to convince someone, look, this is going on. Now they've taken it into their own hands. But that is another instance of when you're a teenager, like what you were talking about, like the teenage stuff. But it's only there for really a couple of scenes. And so like they try to convince the principal. By the way, I forgot to mention she was Lilith in Frasier and Cheers. That's her. She was in the first Jumanji movie. But yeah, they try to convince the principal. They call the cops. And by the way, I'm going off on a tangent here. I thought that was really weird, because when they call the cops and then it's like, oh, you didn't find a dead body in the closet when the lights were off. That was our CPR dummy. And she kind of looks like that woman. And then the cops are like, well, you're in trouble now because that was a false alarm. I don't know anything about calling. Like when about 5 years ago, I had a brand new cell phone and I did not have it locked. And then I opened my phone and I have a missed call and it said, you dialed 911. And I'm like, I am so sorry. My phone was in my pocket. I accidentally butt dialed. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So that's what happens when you accidentally call 911. You don't maybe, I don't know, like Elijah Wood's character was like the good boy. Like if it was Josh Hartnett who had said like, I'm going to call the police, and they're like, listen, you're selling drugs. You failed school last year. Like you are a bad seed. And now you're pulling, it's the boy who cried wolf. We don't believe you. You're in trouble. But it was so weird to me that like, they're like, well, since it wasn't something, Mom and Dad, do you want to come in the principal's office and we can talk to you about this? And they're like, no, we're just going to take him to therapy and then we're going to ground him for the rest of his life. That's good enough. And I was thinking like, I don't know, like, have we seen any evidence that Elijah Wood, like, even if you are his parents and you don't believe that he saw something, like, it's not like he's made a habit out of doing stuff like wasting the police's time and doing stuff like that. And so I thought it was really weird where they were like, not only do we not believe you, but you're in trouble. Like you're grounded. You're not gonna, we're gonna take away your porno magazines and your internet and all this. And I don't know. Like, did you think that was really weird?
There's a level of anger they have towards him that would be like, because like of all the kids in this movie, the one I was most similar to was Elijah Wood.
Same. Yeah.
And so like I know like my parents would have been more like, we don't necessarily believe you, but we believe that you believe something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so like that. But like you said, like it also wants to kind of play into that teenage thing of no one believing you. Mm-hmm. I do want to say, though, I think that's also tied to this other thing that I like about this movie, where it's more successful with the other characters, which is they kind of take the archetypes and turn them on their heads.
Yeah.
Where usually, like, so you have Elijah Wood, who's like the like kind of nerdy outcast character. I don't know if it's ever brought up, but his grades are never brought up, right?
I think at one point his parents say like, oh, like, because the car says my student or my kid is an honor student.
That's right. Okay.
And I think the parents, when they're like tearing apart his room, one of them says like he used to have straight A's. So maybe his grades have dropped, but they don't focus on it a lot. Did I just say his grades have dropped? I did.
It's okay. That's nothing's gonna top what you just did, where you kind of put letters from different words in other spots.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard that on the press tour of Blade Runner 2049, Harrison Ford kept calling Ryan Gosling Brian Rosling?
I haven't heard that. That's great.
He's like, I talked to Brian, and and they're like, Ryan, what's it like working with Harrison Ford? It's like, well, he keeps calling me Brian Rosling, so I don't think he knows my name.
That is amazing.
Oh, I wish I could be as carefree as Harrison Ford.
Mm-hmm.
But though but like, so like the vibe I was getting from him, you were right, those are details. I forgot about them. The vibe I was getting is that he's like a Napoleon Dynamite, where like one thing I realized about being in high school is that like the nerdy kids, like the geeky kids, like they're socially like outcasts and kind of weird and awkward. But here's the thing about real life geeks and nerds that like the movie and TV show geeks and nerds don't have. They're not even smart.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like how many people who are really into Star Trek are also like good at math? Not a lot. At least in my experience.
What these movies don't take into account is that most of the time, if you're on the football team, you are expected to have grades of a certain caliber. If you have straight Fs in every class you have, they are going to like. Now they do make it seem like in this town that football is like what holds the town together. Everyone in town goes to the football game.
They have fireworks at the football games.
Yeah. And like maybe that is what makes the school money is football. And so like the Spider, he's like, hey, I made a D, and then my professor or my teacher brought it up to an A because I was a football student. But most of the time, like the school I went to, if you were on any of the sports teams, on the swim team, like you were expected to have grades at a certain level.
Yeah.
And like I was, there were people who I was kind of quiet in some of my classes. There were people who thought of me as the smart guy because I just kind of kept to myself. And I was like, I'm okay. I'm like, it depends on the class. Like I was awful at chemistry. I hated chemistry. I wasn't great at Spanish. That one was the hardest because it's like I have to learn another language. But like, it depended on the class. Some of my classes, it's like I can breeze through it, and some of them I struggled with. And so, but like I was into, comic books and sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. But you're right. That doesn't mean that you are also an A student. I
actually have a really funny story about chemistry class when I was in high school.
Okay.
So my chemistry class was actually graded on a curve. So I was not very good at chemistry, but I was better than most people in my class, so I was seen as, towards the front of my class.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had like a 70-something%, right? And so my chemistry teacher was like, all right, the people at the front of the class are going to help teach people not at the front of the class. So I'm going to assign a couple of people to you guys. And there was like, Connor, I'm going to assign, I'm going to not use the real names, but M and B. You're going to hang out with Connor. And these are the two prettiest girls in class. And nice. I was like, I was so shy, especially around pretty girls. And that was the year pencil skirts were in. And I was like, I'm too flustered. Like I was so shy and like feeble, like socially feeble.
I'm gonna have to subtitle this podcast episode. Connor and Ruben are horny on Maine. I think is what they call it on Twitter. Like when one time I had a social studies class or a history class. I don't remember what it was called, but sophomore year in high school, and I had this class with the girl, like maybe the prettiest girl in my grade. Okay. Then like the teacher started, like I was sitting next to her in class, and it might have been assigned seating. I don't remember. And she was a very nice girl. I don't think that she would have necessarily sat by me on purpose unless it was assigned seating. Maybe she did. I don't remember. But the teacher started on the other end of the class and was like pairing people off. And then like, I'm like, oh, we're going to be paired off. And I was thinking, I had a similar thought to you of like, oh no, like, I don't know why I said, oh no. But yeah.
Cool. No, cause I had the thought of like, oh, that's awesome. And then like the reality happens where I'm like, I have no idea how to talk to these girls. Like these, like, cause I was in Milwaukee Academy of the Arts, which was like a charter school within the bigger school. But for chemistry, we had to go to the high school proper. So these are like students that I don't usually talk to. Like I know who they are. I've seen them around. They're the popular girls and they're wearing their pencil skirts. And I'm like, okay. And I have like my super long hair at this time. And I wear like just a black t-shirt and jeans that are too big for me. And I'm just like, they're like, so you're going to help us out? And I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so then they just kind of like start talking to each other. I'm like, all right. It was so uncomfortable. Oh my God. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
I'm glad you brought that up though. Speaking of horny on Maine, do we want to talk about Mary Beth?
Uh,
So you mentioned that we both mentioned that this movie is like full of actors that you know from somewhere else. I saw her when she first showed up. My first thought was, is that Ricky Lindholm, who I don't know if you have heard of the band Garfunkel and Oates, but it's these two women and they do like kind of goofy folksy stuff. I don't know how to
Kate McCucci one of them?
Yes.
Okay.
So
okay, yeah, I know who they are. Yeah.
I thought that this woman was that other woman, not Kate McCucci, but the other one. I'm sorry, Kate, I just butchered that name. And then I was like, no, that's not her. Who is she? She was in the straight to sci-fi movie Merlin and the Book of Beasts.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's her. Okay, 'cause I was like looking at everything, and she was. Do you remember there was an animated Underworld like 3-episode miniseries? It was like the Animatrix, but for the Underworld. She was like in that, like a voice in that. And I was like, well, that's not. I don't know her from that. And I'm like looking at all this stuff. She was in an episode of Hulk and the Agents of Smash, and it's like, what have I seen her in? And I finally found that. And I'm like, oh, that's what I know her from. But so spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, but she is a new student who shows up like on the first, at the beginning of this movie, and huge spoilers, but then she ends up being the one who is infecting everybody with the little creatures that are, possessing them. Connor, did you see this twist coming?
I didn't actually, and I was actually impressed with the movie sleight of hand there, because that's tied into a few other twists. Because I do have criticisms of the way this movie's structured, but I do think they foreshadow and have like the red herrings in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Well, yes. At first, whenever they're like, hey, she's the alien queen, I was like, wait a minute, we saw her. But then I was thinking back, it's like, well, we saw her start to. So Josh Hartnett has got the drugs in these like ink pens, like it's powdered form and it's inside an ink pen. And so in the scene, it's kind of like that scene from The Thing. They all have to open up the bottom of an ink pen and then snort this stuff. And it ends with Jordana Brewster and this other lady. They're both like, okay, well, you'll both do it at the same time. And so then other lady, she like starts to put it up to her nose, and we hear Jordana Brewster say something, or she makes a noise. And then like it's like, oh, she's got like slugs under her skin. She's one of them. She's an alien. And then she runs away and gets in a car with somebody else. And then blonde lady, she comes out and she's kind of giggling because this is like the fastest acting illicit narcotic in the world. Like 10 seconds after Elijah Wood took it, he's like giggling like a little baby. And so she comes out, she's kind of laughing. But we don't see her actually snort the stuff. We see her start to put it up to her nose, and then it cuts to Jordana Brewster. And at first I thought, that's a cheat. But then I was like, oh, wait, no, it's not. And it shows like a flashback of how she did it. Like she, being a shapeshifter, basically, she was able to close up her nostrils, and then she opened up the other end of the pen, and then it all came out, and she didn't snort any of it. And so I kind of like that once it, but I was thinking at one point, it is suspicious that she shows up and that's when everything starts. And then Jordana Brewster even mentions that, but then you're put at ease whenever seemingly Jordana Brewster is the alien, and this other one seemingly has taken the drug, and so she's in the clear. So at first I felt like it was a cheat, but then I kind of came around on it before the movie was even over.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because so the thing is, like, once all of the students are together and they fight Green Lantern John Stewart, played by Edward Furlong, and they're like, let's get out of here. At that point, I was kind of bought in. Because I don't see and so when there's the scene, the reason why I felt like the drug snorting scene kind of lacked the proper tension that I think the scene from The Thing has is when I'm watching The Thing, that scene has the single greatest jump scare in movie history. Mm-hmm. It is so good because as that scene progresses, you start to think that not that Kurt Russell is the Thing, but you start to think that he might be a little crazy. That he's wrong.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize that he maybe starts to lacking belief in himself. He's still testing the blood, but you kind of get past the point of okay, there's like 2 petri dishes left. And you're like, I don't think any of them are gonna. He's just basically being horrible to these people, and they didn't do anything wrong, right? And so like he kind of lets his guard down a little bit, and he's in the middle of talking when he tests one of them, and then that's the the thing blood, right? And it like totally trips you up. It's so good. My thing is the movie had won me over in The Faculty when they all fight Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
You know? And so like I was thinking like if people in this group are aliens, that would have been the time to turn on them. Because like you're cornered, you're in a room with them while Josh Hartnett's trying to fight Jon Stewart. You can have like if one of them's the alien, they can just like jump on behind. And now that there's like 2 of them that are aliens, as it turns out, like those 2 girls could have easily like gotten the rest of them, right? And so like that's like one of those things where it's like that's the part where I was like, when you get to them all snorting the ink, there was no tension in it for me because the movie had won me over. Like I wasn't questioning them when they're in the car. I wasn't questioning any of them when they're trying to walk to the car. Like that, even like after fighting Jon Stewart, like they're trying to like get to the car as inconspicuously as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a great point for them to just go, wow, 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 like make some weird alien noise and then like just signal for all of them to swarm on them, right? Like, I don't know, like it was one of those things where it was like, that's just there because in the screenplay, we need to have like, I guess John Carpenter structured that movie perfectly. Structurally, we need to have this scene here to raise tension. So that was where I kind of had issue with that.
You were right. And there are lots of moments where the alien queen, her name is Mary Beth something, because and that is true to the South, because when she first started speaking, I was like, oh, here we have, and she's a Canadian actress. I said, I would bet everything I own she has never set foot below the Mason-Dixon line. And I have said before that if you are going to play someone from the South, you need to spend some time in the South, because it doesn't sound as Foghorn Leghorn as what she's doing. But by the end of the movie, I'm like, oh, she's doing a fake accent because she's not really from the South. Okay, I was okay. Fair, I'll take that back. But then so Mary Beth, and also I like the so and so Beth, like the Lisa Beth or Katie Beth or Sarah Beth, whatever. That is a thing. Like I don't know if that's a thing up north. I don't know, but
no, up here all the white girls have a middle name Marie. So
okay. Good, noted. I'll whenever I'm gonna do my my West Coast, I don't know, but so Mary Beth is kind of sweet on what's Josh Hartnett, and at one point they are in the chemistry lab because he's needing supplies to make his drugs, and then they start kissing a little bit. When you find out later that she is an alien, why didn't she infect him right then and there? Because all they have to do, you put a little slug inside someone's ear. That's how they infect Salma Hayek. And at the football game, Usher is like leaning over a guy he knocked over and putting like worms in his ear. And Star Trek Wrath of Khan, like that's very that. So why didn't she just do it then? She's like right next to him, and then he turns around because he hears the other teenagers talking through the air vent. She could have real quick like got right up next to his ear and spat in it,
Yep.
And then like, now I did see someone theorize that when the fight scene with Jon Stewart is happening, that and I'd have to go back and look, that Mary Beth and Jordana Brewster both go and hide behind the same desk, and that maybe she infected her then. Because there's one of two. It's either then or it's right after the closet scene where Jordana Brewster goes home and the teachers and the cops are saying we tried calling and no one's answering, and so she's either being infected then or she's being infected during the fight scene. But you raise a good.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, just you raise a good point that after infecting Jordana Brewster, you're right. When they're walking to the car, if your goal as the alien is to infect everybody, why in the world are you waiting on these 4 or however many are left? And the answer is, well, we still have a lot of movie left, and we want to do this cool scene that we borrowed from The Thing. But you're right. Why does the alien wait?
Yeah, and then on top of that, so when it comes to the Jordana Brewster, I liked how her being an alien was seated, because I can see, like, if you're breaking it down on a timetable, it makes sense that if they hid behind the same table, they could have done that. But that day starts off like we're introduced to Jordana Brewster on that day where she's like, basically putting on her nerd cosplay, right? Where she has her hair up in a ponytail and she's wearing glasses and she has like, kind of a button-up shirt that she's put on. and that's like a clue, because the thing is when the alien gets people, like the adults change in some way, where like in the first scene, Piper Laurie is this very mousy teacher. And then the next day she kind of has more of like a Catherine Martell girl boss thing going on. And then Famke Janssen goes from being similarly like I don't even know. Yeah. Yeah, she goes from the bottom to the top. And so like, but no, but it's like, she's like, I'm surprised she's even a teacher. Like she's so mousy and like fragile. And then like, she just shows up and is like looking like Famke Janssen. And like, you know, punches Zeke in the face and then like basically like curb stomps him and then does a Hulk Hogan body slam on him. Like she is like completely different, right? That doesn't actually happen. But like, so when you have Jordana Brewster, who is kind of like the, you know, the queen bee, and then she shows up the next day basically wearing the clothes of the more mousy thing, you know, they have a good built-in excuse of they're trying to take me down. I'm basically like incognito mode, right? Like I'm in a disguise as a nerd, but it's also signaling that she's changed. She actually is an alien. Yeah. And I like that. I do like that quite a bit.
And that happens before the attack by Jon Stewart. So like I said, I was not sure. I was thinking it was one of those two. And I was thinking before I saw someone say that on the internet, I was thinking it probably happened off screen whenever they said we can't reach her at home. I was thinking that was when it was. But and you like you said, she's changed at that point. But yeah, I kind of like the idea, and I don't know if this is me reading too much into it. I like the idea that maybe the alien queen legitimately wants to be friends with these guys, and that she like something happened to her world that forced her to leave and come to Earth and seek like suitable hosts for her children.
Zeke, yeah.
And so I like the idea that she's like, you know, I actually want to be friends with these guys, and now they are trying to kill me, and they have found a real way to endanger me and my children, so now I have to infect them. I don't know if that's me reading too much into it and solving a plot hole for them, or if that was actually intentional, and if it was, maybe she should have said that at some point. Because there is a scene where Clea Duvall is kind of eyeing Spider, and it's killing me that I can't remember his name, but I'm not going to look it up. And Mary Beth says, well, howdy do. Why don't you just go and talk to him? And Clea Duvall's like, no, I'm not going to. And then she kind of like nudges Clea Duvall, and she falls into Spider's lap. And that's really sweet of the alien queen. She seems to be, I'm looking out for my friend here. I'm going to set her up with that guy. She likes him, and he seems to like her. They keep having these like weird meet cutes where they yell at each other for bumping into each other. So I'm going to help get these two together. And then at the end of the movie, it's like, wait a minute, but she's an alien, and she's like, you know, infecting all these people. And she ended up killing this innocent old woman. And so it's like, well, but I don't know, like, am I reaching when I say that that's a possibility?
No, I don't think so. I think that because like one of the issues I have with the movie is I don't feel like I understand how these aliens work all that well. Where like when an alien infects one of the humans, like it's like they have all the humans' memories. Yeah. Where like Famke Janssen walks up to Zeke and is like, you know, like telling him off, and it's like, okay, she's
saying like, you know, your mom is out of country, like, you know, she left you and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's making like all these like statements, and it's like, you know, the tell is that she's an alien because she's not Xenia Onabottom no more. And so it's like, but it's like, so does the alien take all of it? Feels like it's just like, I don't know, it's like, I'm trying to think of like a comic book example. It's like if I don't know, like they're all on fear gas, except fear gas makes you more confident or something, like, or they're on venom or something. Yeah, like, I don't know, like it feels like it's that where whereas like this, it's like, I don't know if this is just like the aliens taking over their host and then like having access to all their memories and then being very sympathetic to this person's perspective and then like giving that person more of a backbone or what. Like I'm kind of confused on those details. And so when you do talk about like, you know, Clea Duvall, it's like, well, I don't see any of the other if it is what you're, theorizing that, oh, what if it's an alien that just wants to be friends with all these people? Well, it's like, how come the alien that's infecting Famke Janssen doesn't want to be friends with more people, right? Like it's I'm confused in that regard.
Yeah, that is a good point. Because you're right, it doesn't quite like you can kind of draw from like things that it is that it's similar to, and so like Wrath of Khan, they put the weird little worms in Chekhov's ear, and that other guy who's in the Terminator, and then they are more like Chekhov seems to be acting enough like Chekhov that Kirk and Spock are not thinking, hey, what's up with Chekhov? And so maybe if the idea is, well, you've seen sci-fi movies before, just kind of go with it. Just assume that the rules there are the rules here.
Yeah.
And that's not fair because, if I do if I do a vampire movie, I might want to make a different vampire movie than what, Bela Lugosi, the novel.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like the novel Dracula does not burn up as soon as sunlight hits him. But that was a thing that the early vampire movies invented. And so for this movie to say like, well, it's a slug in the ear movie, just go with it. Like, I can't, that's not enough information to go on.
Yeah, well, and it's also like there's like I think some of the self-aware like kind of meta stuff also just feels like it's just getting around some half-baked mythology, where it's like they're like, what if all these alien movies aren't science fiction? What if they were just made by aliens? And they also say, well, let's just assume that all these aliens that made science fiction were also giving us the information to defeat them. Like,
yeah.
What? Like, and I also just have like an issue with that just on the face of it, where they're like, what if like Lucas and Spielberg were like aliens? Ugh. And I'm like, no, like, because like I just don't like that, because I've actually been watching through all of Steven Spielberg's movies, and it's like those aren't like E.T.'s not just an alien schlock movie. It's a very personal story that's using aliens as a metaphor. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's not, it's, now I really like The Thing, but it's not like The Thing where it's about an alien. You know what I mean? Like it's not like the movie Alien, where it's like you can look, like I think E.T. is more personal to Spielberg's experience of divorce than something like Alien or The Thing is to Ridley Scott and John Carpenter, where those are using the aliens in science fiction as a means of telling a story about like paranoia and like other things about the human condition, but you can also, but they're not as like personally ingrained, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I know it's just weird that they use those examples, and I don't know, it was just like weird that they're like, oh, they basically just did that. It's like, that's a weird theory that the movie I guess is just gonna run with.
Well, and I think because maybe I'm thinking of a different scene, because Elijah Wood is talking to Clea Duvall, and he says, what if, because he says the creative writing teacher says, write what you know. And that is a thing. My creative writing teacher said that just about every week. But he said, so what if whoever wrote the Invasion of the Body Snatchers dealt with aliens? So I thought that was what he said. Not that the writer was an alien, but that he had experiences with aliens. Now, that's still weird, because if in the 1950s, and I don't know when, because she said that movie was based on a Robert Heinlein story. Okay, well, let's take it back to Robert Heinlein. I don't know when he wrote that, in the 40s or 50s, but now if you were to, I feel like the Roswell incident is kind of tried and true, or maybe played out is a better, like, if you say like, well, what if the Roswell incident, what if Robert Heinlein dealt with weird slug aliens and then he wrote a story, like, you're on, like, you have a very good point, because why wouldn't Robert Heinlein just go to the newspapers and say, you're not going to believe me, but this weird thing just happened? And, I don't know, like, and there's another part where Clea Duvall says, maybe if we kill the queen, then all the others will just go back to normal. And that's like, they do that so that they can kind of restore status quo at the end. But what if it doesn't go back to normal? Like, I can't think of any example, like if you kill an earthworm, all the baby earthworms aren't suddenly going to die. They might die because or you kill a cow and the calves might die because they don't have anything to, like, they're not drinking the milk anymore or something, but it's not like their life is intrinsically tied to the mom,
Yes. No, I completely agree. That's, again, just like you said, we got to go back to status quo. Or it's like the same thing with like the self-aware, like referencing other body snatcher type movies where it's like, well, we're just going to make these like leaps in logic And the movie's just going to treat that like, that's the gospel in this world. Like those are just the rules because, well, we only have 100 minutes and this is the best way we can come up with an explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a question. Maybe
Okay.
they answered this, but I don't remember where. Elijah Wood becomes like aware of the invasion because he basically finds one of the aliens dried out on the football field.
Yeah.
How did that alien get there?
That's a good question. Because at the beginning of the movie, Robert Patrick is yelling at the football team, and then he goes and he kicks over a bench, and then it's like the sprinkler turns on, and he's like, no, and so he's like trying to stop water from coming out of the sprinkler. So he's knelt down on the ground, and then a shadow kind of looms over him, and he turns around and he says, yeah, what do you want? And then we don't know who that is, and so it's probably Mary Beth. Later in the movie, I'm kind of putting together stuff like, well, when it's Piper Laurie and Robert Patrick infect Salma Hayek, they spit one slug into her ear, and then there's also like a lot of blood and it's gross. And then like 10 seconds later, her face has no blood on it. But then at the end of the movie, when Mary Beth is in like full on like queen alien xenomorph mode, and then she is like most of her body has been crushed by the bleachers. And then when Elijah Wood injects the drug into her, and she spits like 6 or 7 of the leeches onto his face. So maybe she spit a whole bunch of them at Robert Patrick, and then one of them didn't make it into him. And then because Jordana Brewster, she has a whole bunch of them under her skin, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so maybe the idea is when they are infected, with the exception of Salma Hayek, it's a whole bunch. You're just throwing what you can at them, and then one of them or maybe multiple of them will get inside, and then maybe one just didn't make it in Robert Patrick.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, good call.
But then
I'd be willing to accept that.
Do what?
I said I'd be willing to accept that.
Okay. But then also because Robert Patrick was right next to the water sprinkler. So, and then we find out, it's an aquatic creature because they accidentally spilled some water on it and it like resuscitated it. So then I'm thinking, why was it dried out if it was right there next to where Robert Patrick was kneeling?
Yeah.
But that's at that point, I'm probably just kind of cinema sensing it up, looking for things that like, don't worry about it. Just watch the movie.
Yeah. Well, okay. What if the slug monster thing is just like, it didn't get into Robert Patrick and it's just kind of like flopping on the football field. And then like, as the water goes away, the sun's out and then it just kind of dries out.
Yeah.
And then the sprinkler can come back on and then it just flops around some more.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Yeah, okay.
So, did you have anywhere else you wanted to go?
I just had one more like thing to just kind of point out. This feels like another like weird structural thing where it feels like if this was a TV miniseries or a TV show, you have the episode where they're all like hanging out in the basement having to do like the drug test.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like the next episode is the football game. But it was just weird that like we see the football game in the first act. It's like this thing that's like, it's this event. And it's like in a movie, it's like you seed that so that in the third act, that's like the big event that like the climax is kind of happening around. Mm-hmm. And then it's like in the movie, they get into a car, go to someone's house, do some drugs, and then it just becomes nighttime outside. And well, that's fine, right? Like they're hanging out in the house for a while. And then that one person who's like in a car outside just knows Jordana Brewster's going to run out, I guess. But then what happens is like, oh my God, where did she go? And it turns out she's going to the football game. And that just felt like a weird structural thing where it felt like if she's like on the run, like I don't know, I'm trying to think like, what if there's like something inside of Josh Hartnett's house that's like, this is like our silver bullet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh man, Jordana Brewster stole our silver bullet. And now she's on her way to the game. And so then what you have is like the big game is happening. And then it's like you have the climax happening in the bleachers. And then eventually it gets onto the field. And like the football teams are like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's like this thing, like you kind of, as RLM, Red Letter Media guys would say, shoot the rodeo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like this, it's all kind of happening as this one big event. And it's just kind of weird. Like once we actually get to the football game, it's like they've re-strategized. They're like, well, she went to the football game. oh, actually, shouldn't all the aliens be there? Oh, actually, there should be a queen too. So then it's like they go to the football game, and they don't really go to the football game. They go to the gym that's adjacent to the football game. And then they just kind of wait for the principal to like follow them there. Like it was kind of awkward to me.
Yeah. Well, and I guess like the idea is like everyone in town is going to be at the football game, so we need to infect everyone at the town, and that's why Jordana Brewster is going there. But you've already got like enough people infected that maybe Jordana Brewster isn't going there. Maybe, you got Robert Patrick there and the entire football team. Like it was hinting that almost the entire student body had been infected before they went to Josh Hartnett's house. Yeah. So maybe Jordana Brewster is driving for an hour and a half to the next town over, and then she's going to start infecting people over there. Like that, it's another kind of leap in logic similar to if we defeat the queen, all the others will die. Maybe she's going to be at the football game, and she is, but it's weird that they know that because they say, well, everyone in town is going to be there. Everyone in town who is not infected is going to be there, and the infected, they're going to be there to infect. But like I said, you've already got so many infected. Maybe if the goal is to infect as many people as you can, maybe she's going somewhere else to start doing that.
Right. I'm trying to think of another movie that does this, where it's like, there's this event that's seated in the first act, and then in the climax, it's like what the climax is kind of built around.
I don't know. I'm sure I could. Yeah, if given time, I could probably think of it. Have you seen the movie Slither?
I have not. No.
Okay, it in some ways reminded me a lot of this movie. It's by what's his name who did
James Gunn.
Yes. And I mean, in some ways, it's a small town alien story. But I did enjoy this movie, but I think I would have to say I think Slither is the better movie. But it kind of feels similar that you've got like, oh, the odds are stacked against us in that kind of way. But it's also like got a lot more of the gross stuff, like with Slither. James Gunn and his roots are like really disgusting, vile, like pushing the envelope kind of stuff. And like in this movie, at times I feel like it's trying to it's a rated R movie, but I feel like it's not going as hard as it could. Like at one point, Josh Hartnett, he breaks a mouse's neck because he infected the mouse, and he wants to see like he wants to dissect the mouse and see what's going on after you've infected it with this thing. And then so he breaks the mouse's neck, but he does it off screen. And yeah, you don't want PETA on your back, but it still feels like it's like, well, this is a rated R movie. Why are you like for the kiddies who are watching? You know what I'm saying? Like with James Gunn's Slither, it feels like it's going a lot harder.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that they made the teenagers talk like teenagers. Like there's a lot of F-bombs in this, not like a gratuitous amount though. Like gratuitous in the way that teenagers use like language gratuitously, but
yeah. You go to a high school, you're going to hear a lot of that.
It's kind of shocking how elementary school kids and high school kids talk the exact same way. But yeah, no, you're right. Cause like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of like, I know people just have a problem with like animal cruelty in movies. Mm-hmm. It's like people will watch Jason and Michael Myers just cut up people all day long, but something about seeing that happen to animals like bothers people.
It's what
I think that probably comes down to, in a lot of movie productions, they don't have the safety towards the animals that we have towards humans, where it's like, that actor wasn't actually impaled by Michael Myers, but like, it looks like that animal actually was impaled by that actor on the set.
Yeah. It's why the Dean Cain direct to sci-fi movie Dragon Fighter, if you go to Internet Movie Database, the last time I looked, there was a thing there. It said no dragons were harmed in the making of this movie. I was like, okay, that movie is trash, but I enjoy that. I only had one other thing. I do find it amusing, and since we're both being horny on Maine, I'm not complaining. But after Mary Beth is revealed to be the alien queen, she like jumps in the swimming pool, and then when she comes out, she's naked. And then Josh Hartnett, he ran out to his car to get what was left of the drugs. And then when he comes back in, he sees Clea Duvall, and then she's like, "Look out behind you! It's Mary Beth." And then Mary Beth is naked, and he's like, "Why are you naked?" And then she's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm the alien because I'm naked." And I'm thinking like, they probably had a better chance of sneaking up on him if she still had her clothes on, and then he wouldn't have immediately been like, "Well, that's a little weird." But again, not complaining. But yeah, that was a moment where I was like, why did her clothes disappear? Like, I guess when she turns into like a almost kaiju-sized like monster, that like her clothes, I guess, like tore off of her body, and they just kind of, all tore to pieces, and so she doesn't have them. Like, she's not shape-shifting her clothes, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, no, that's true. But like that's another, like I talk, if I'm gonna give them credit for the way they've like, did some of the red herrings and stuff, I guess I will poke holes in the way they fail to do that in other ways, where it's like, what's like, I never saw Mary Beth and Jordana Brewster, like they weren't just like chugging water the way everyone else seemed to be.
Oh yeah, good point. And that definitely would have been a giveaway. Because you're right, like the teachers that are infected, they are like just drinking water like it's going out of style. But then you're right, like,
and because they also talk about like it's hot, and it's like one of those things where like one of my favorite genre of movies is like the it's hot kind of thing, where it's like Rear Window falls into this category. Do the Right Thing falls into this category. Stuff like that. Where it's
a black and white thing.
12 Angry Men. Where it's just like, just tons and tons of like, it's super hot. Tensions are rising. I'll say, I like Robert Rodriguez as a director. I like the energy he brings to this. I felt like he could have, really highlighted the, paranoia intensity with the weather better. And if it's super hot and everyone's just sweating constantly, it wouldn't be a giveaway. Like if Josh Hartnett is just chugging water the same way Elijah would, and also Mary Beth would, like, it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just weird that like none of them are drinking water at all.
That's a good point. One I didn't think of. Have you ever watched Cheers? This is a weird tangent, but
no, my brother has actually watched every single episode of Cheers and Frasier, and I've not.
Okay, he can tell you that this was a funny. In the very first episode of Cheers, so Diane is about to get married, and they stop off at the bar so that her husband can go and do something, and so and he's talking on the phone. And some of the regulars in the bar are having a disagreement on what is the sweatiest movie. And so they're saying Cool Hand Luke, Aliens, and I don't remember what the others were. But then
Ben-Hur is one of them, right?
Ben-Hur, yeah. And so when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, all those movies. I do want to say I found it to be kind of funny when Spider has finally made his decision that he's going to quit the football team, and then like he's doing the overly excited student thing, like the teacher who and I did like that you don't actually see the male teacher, I don't remember his name, you don't actually see him get infected, but you kind of know, because when Jordana Brewster and Elijah Wood see the body in the closet, they run out and they see the principal, and the last time we saw the principal, she was being attacked by Piper Laurie and Robert Patrick. And so it's like, oh, she's back to here, so she's acting like nothing's wrong, so we know she's infected. And then that male teacher is also there, and he's kind of acting the same as the principal, so you know, okay, he was infected too. But what I like with how they do him is that earlier in the movie, he is drinking from a coffee, like a ceramic mug, and he's poured liquor in it with his flask. And he says, turn to chapter 4, and then Spider, he like raises his hand real high and says, actually, we covered that last time. We were supposed to be in, and I kind of thought that was funny. And then the next time they're in that class, the teacher is now drinking from a water bottle instead of the coffee mug. And so I think that's a nice little clue that, okay, he's different. But then he does is this going to be on the test? And I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny that it's almost like he doesn't know what a good student is supposed to do. So he's doing what he thinks a good student is supposed to do.
Yeah, no, I like that too.
Yeah.
By the way, that actor, if this movie was like remade today, J.K. Simmons would be cast in that role.
Yeah.
First of all, he sounds exactly like J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. It's like crazy. And he looks like the character Emery Battis from Twin Peaks.
Okay. Sorry. I'm drawing a blank on who that is.
He's the guy who like brings the girls from Horn's department store to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't think of that, but yeah. So that's about all I had to say. it's a movie that I enjoy, but it's not without its problems. But I would probably watch it again. If the place that I work has DVDs for $1. If I saw it there, I'd buy that for $1, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Like I was kind of disappointed by it ultimately, but like it could have been a lot worse. I'm glad I finally saw it. It's been on my list for some time. One last detail I forgot to mention.
Okay, yeah.
I like how not nice Jordana Brewster is in this movie, because I'm so used to where it's like this girl's like on the school paper and she's dating the captain of the football team. Like you expect it to be like he's the dumb jock who's like very possessive of her, and he's like, I want to be good at my grades, and she's like, why? And she's kind of like mean and horrible. It was kind of a nice subversion. I kind of actually enjoyed that aspect of it, and that great bit where Elijah Wood's just like, you're just awful.
Yeah.
And then she kind of starts flirting with him and he doesn't know how to handle it. It's
yeah. Good. I liked his line delivery because he says, you can be a real, and she says, a what? You know, really cool human being when you're also not being a complete. And I was just like, I love it. You think it's going in a direction, then it takes a turn, then it goes right back in the direction you think it was going in. And like you say, he like, if at that age, heck, at this age right now in my life, if a woman, if an attractive woman started batting her eyelashes at me, I would not know what to do. So that is right what you know. That is, if I had to guess, not Robert Patrick, maybe Robert Patrick, I don't know, Robert Rodriguez probably wrote a little bit of himself into poor Elijah Wood's character. So, you know, that was very, I felt like it was very authentic.
Yeah. All right. So next time, well, sadly, another Twin Peaks actor has passed away. That was Tom Sizemore, who was in Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought he was awesome in that. But he was in just a lot of movies, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. I had a few that I could have picked from, but I'm going to pick a movie. I don't know if you've seen this.
Okay.
Tell me if you have or have not. I'm actually just going to double check to make sure he is in it. I think 90% of me is sure he is. Anyways, it is Ridley Scott's 2001 war film Black Hawk Down.
I have not seen it.
Okay, I am looking at it. He is in it. There was just a ton. It actually has Josh Hartnett in it too. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, this has.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm looking at the cast.
Josh Hartnett, Ewan McGregor, Eric Bana, Jason Isaacs, William Fichtner, Tom Sizemore, Spud from Trainspotting, Orlando Bloom, Tom Hardy, just everybody.
Yeah.
Anyways, Ty Burrell. Wow. Okay. So I've seen this once before. It's kind of like the movie that changed war movies in the 21st century. But yeah, I'm excited to give this another watch. I don't know how you feel about war movies. It was between this or Saving Private Ryan. So I picked this one because I know you're not the biggest Spielberg fan.
Right. I don't know if I really have much of an opinion on war movies. I don't watch a lot of them, so that's maybe that tells you something. But I can go for it. This has got the one guy who is in The Mummy. Not the guy who looks like Diet Brendan Fraser, but the other one who is in The Americans. Corey Johnson. He was in Morbius. For all you Morbius fans. Yes. So and it's on HBO Max if any of you all want to listen at home. So yeah, that's what we'll talk about next time. I had forgotten that Tom Sizemore had passed away because that was announced and I had completely forgotten about that. So yeah, I am just glad you did not pick Natural Born Killers, which is the only other Tom Sizemore movie I've seen, and I kind of hated that movie. I thought you were going to go for it. I would have watched it, but I would have been gone kicking and screaming every stretch of the way. So yeah, looking forward to that. And we'll talk about that sometime in the future. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
I'm Connor Nielsen.
And we'll see you then. Have a good one.